from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kaylee Lines.
Saudi Arabia brings the deals, but what does the U.S. get? Welcome to the Wednesday edition of Balance of Power, as this week's visit by the Saudi Crown Prince settles into an investment conference today at the Kennedy Center with the likes of Elon Musk and Jensen Huang. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington, alongside Michelle Jamrisko. Coming up in the next hour, we'll be joined for insights by Ashton, founder of Ashton Analytics, with the idea of a technology transfer to Saudi Arabia that could include the Chinese. And we're going to bring you a special conversation as well with the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern is at the conference and will be bringing us those remarks a little bit later on this hour. So let's get started on this NVIDIA earnings day by looking at Wall Street. Charlie Pellet has that covered for us, live from World Headquarters in New York. How nervous are we, Charlie?
Right now, it is all about the big end. Yes, complete coverage right here on Bloomberg Television and Radio. After the bell, we got you covered on NVIDIA. Right now, the stock higher ahead of earnings, up by 1.9%, but lots of questions what this means for the broader market. Do want to begin, however, with a developing story headline right off the Bloomberg Professional Service. U.S. government plans to buy and own as many as 10 large nuclear reactors, projects that could be paid for by a $550 billion pledged investment fund being offered up by Japan. Indeed, that story breaking right now on the Bloomberg terminal. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, last update, we had stocks lower. Right now, the Dow does remain lower by 45 points, down by about 0.1%, but both the S&P and NASDAQ, they are both higher. S&P up 13 at 6630 right now, a gain of 0.2%. NASDAQ Composite Index up 0.3%. The NASDAQ 100 Index up 0.2, and our Mag 7 Index up 0.6%. NVIDIA shares ahead of earnings, up now by 2%. 10-year is currently yielding 4.11%. We have got the 2-year at 3.57%. Spot gold right now up 0.3%, 4,079 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.3%, 59.32 a barrel, and Bitcoin 89,332 on Bitcoin. Bitcoin slumping by 3.8%. So again, all about NVIDIA today. Focus on that stock after the close of trading, but ahead of earnings, up now by 2%. Balance of Power continues right now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie, you know it is all about NVIDIA, and we'll have much more after 4 p.m. with special coverage here on Bloomberg TV and radio, including a special late edition of Balance of Power that starts at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be looking hard at the Washington angle surrounding the AI race, the investment race, including the pursuit of energy, of course, the red tape, the permitting, and the NIMBYism that comes along with the data center build-out, never mind regulations around the use of artificial intelligence itself, its impact on the job market and intellectual property here in the United States of America. All of that is coming later and will be buttressed by an exclusive interview with Jensen Huang himself. That's going to come in the 6 p.m. Eastern hour. Our own Ed Ludlow will be sitting down with the CEO at NVIDIA, who's in the nation's capital today. He's over at the Kennedy Center with Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Scott Bessent, and the rest, including Howard Lutnick, who's going to be talking with us here on Bloomberg TV and radio a little bit later this hour with a flurry of deals that have been released since the Crown Prince arrived here in Washington. I want to mention a couple of red headlines that just crossed the terminal. And Michelle, it's great to see you back here today. All of this ties into the AI story. Mm-hmm. The United States now planning to own up to 10 new nuclear reactors, according to officials at the Department of Energy. The DOE Chief of Staff speaking at the conference in Tennessee that we've got an eye on here when it comes to energy. This would be an incredible development in a country that had completely turned away from nuclear energy, but is in desperate need of this power now because of data centers.
Right, that's right. And certainly another tangent in a long speech that is ongoing right now with
true.
Trump at the investment forum. So a lot to unpack today, but it all comes back to this part two, day two of the MBS visit and what will come out of it. So hopefully we can kind of organize all the thoughts that are swarming.
Well, that's for sure.
But that is certainly one of them. Jensen Huang is playing center stage today.
Yeah, that's right. And to see Huang and Musk together on stage. By the way, Jensen Huang was wearing a suit, no leather jacket. Let's see if that is the case when he talks to Ed Ludlow later on. But we're talking about just a massive data center and a massive amount of computing power that's being dedicated to Saudi Arabia with Elon Musk rolling this out with Jensen Huang, because they'll be relying on NVIDIA chips.
Well, certainly, and there's the big question, too, not only with Saudi Arabia, but also with China. How much do we allow to be transferred?
Right.
What is advanced? And when you transfer the tech, will it be safely in the hands of the person that it's intended for?
Exactly.
Or could it be transferred further?
I wonder what Anna Ashton has to think about that. This is coming off our conversation with Denver Riggleman yesterday as he described the potential for leaks or creep or whatever we want to call it in Saudi Arabia, knowing that the country is buying, for instance, weapons, defensive weapon systems from Russia, will now be owning F-35s, will now have access to high-end AI chips made by NVIDIA, the likes of Blackwell. Does any of this end up in the hands of the Chinese? She's the founder of Ashton Analytics and a specialist in U.S.-China trade, former China analyst with the Department of Defense. Anna, it's great to have you back. Are we on the right track here?
Far be it from me to answer that question, but I will say, it's reasonable to ask whether or not this presents some sort of leak risk that could allow the Chinese to get a hold of the more advanced NVIDIA chips that NVIDIA is not allowed to sell into the Chinese market. These are definitely much closer to top tier chips than what China can buy. And, there's this awkward reality that China has built large parts of Saudi Arabia's digital and telecom infrastructure in order to strengthen its relationships in the Middle East. Now that stuff's going to be run, with U.S. chips, according to U.S. rules, maybe. So that, that does potentially give China access, although there are a lot of controls in place on the U.S. side that are supposed to prevent that. But more importantly, it changes the strategic game for China vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. It potentially limits China's influence and it complicates its strategy of making Saudi Arabia a long-term tech partner. It complicates China's plans for the digital Belt and Road.
Well, just to offer the counter argument, Anna, and of course you've been attuned to this, I'm sure, but the debate has really been heating up between the China national security hawks and the tech world. And what we hear often from the White House, particularly the likes of David Sachs, is that you can be a China national security hawk or an XYZ national security hawk and still embrace the tech side of it. Is there a way to thread the needle? Is there a way in this argument to assure that the tech can be transferred safely and securely and still benefit in all the ways that you would from tech prosperity while also guarding against the national security risk?
I mean, certainly that is the position of people like Jensen Huang, and it is also, absolutely the case that these very tech companies that give the United States its competitive edge in any tech competition with China, do need to be able to access bigger markets than just the U.S. and Europe. They need to be able to sell their chips abroad and lots of other places in order to have the funding to remain at the competitive edge, especially when we're talking about China's government bankrolling a lot of the efforts to catch up with U.S. tech advantages. And one of the biggest markets there is, of course, is China.
Well, Anna, I want to follow with something a little more China-focused, and given that's also your expertise in any case. Bloomberg was reporting last week that the U.S. and China have yet to agree on the sort of rare earth export controls lifting that was agreed between the two leaders. Where do you see that conversation going? Do you have any sense of whether or not there will be some sort of agreement to kind of free up the rare earths that the U.S. side so badly wants?
I mean, definitely we've had lots of signals that there is an agreement in the works. I mean, there have been announcements from Chinese government agencies and announcements from the U.S. government indicating that that's the track that the two countries are on. The question is, are the U.S. perceptions of what was agreed to the same as the Chinese perceptions of what was agreed to? In the past, it really mattered coming out of any U.S.-China talks whether or not there was a joint statement. And it mattered because of the fact that there often were differing perceptions about exactly what the two sides had signed up for. We don't often have any sort of written outcome document now. one from either side, let alone one that is a joint outcome document. So there certainly are questions there. And I think it's important to reiterate that even with the agreement in place and moving forward, regardless of whether it looks like something that Washington thinks it is or whatever Beijing thinks it is, it's not permanent. It is temporary, and it is not a total lifting of all restrictions. It's simply, a lessening of the hurdles for the U.S. To get access to certain of these materials.
Anna, what does Beijing think? What does President Xi think of this dance this week in Washington between President Trump and the Crown Prince?
I'm sure that it is not a surprise, because we've seen that Trump has courted the Crown Prince in the past, and he takes a very different view. Is he threatened by this relationship? I don't think that Xi Jinping is threatened by this relationship, but I do think that he has to be taking it seriously as potentially complicating his own relationship with Saudi Arabia. Absolutely.
Yeah, certainly a lot to explore there, and also the Russia component. That's one thing that we were bringing up yesterday in our conversations with guests about whether or not the tech transfer, particularly of F-35 military aircraft, could fall in the hands, or the wrong hands in any case, in the U.S.'s view. I mean, going back to what we were talking about previously, where do you see Russia kind of playing into this conversation at the moment?
Well, I mean, I imagine that there are both worries and reasons for optimism in Moscow as well as Beijing, because, on the one hand, I think that it's obvious that there is a desire to not see the U.S. cozy up to the Crown Prince and be able to facilitate a stronger U.S.-Saudi Arabia relationship. Both Russia and China have interests in keeping that relationship from being too close. On the other hand, the kinds of technology that the U.S. is offering to Saudi Arabia absolutely are of interest to both China and Russia, and Saudi Arabia may potentially provide an avenue for accessing those.
Anna, we talked earlier on the sidelines of Bloomberg's New Economy Forum in Singapore with John Waldron, President Chief Operating Officer at Goldman Sachs, who addressed the geopolitical risk here when it comes to the engagement of the U.S. and China. Listen to what he said.
I think that the dynamic between the U.S. and China, which we call increasing strategic interdependence. So the countries are interdependent, but there are going to be areas where they're going to be more focused on national security. And because that relationship is getting much more complicated, you're seeing more fragmentation around the world. And so a lot of the conversation here in Singapore this week has been about fragmentation, new regional alliances, redesigning supply chains. I worry about that because it's a new world order, and we don't really know what to expect in that new world order. And I think that will create disruption and pressure in the system, which is, kind of unprecedented for the system that we've operated under for quite a long time.
So, Anna, where does the Middle East, where does Saudi Arabia fall in that new world order?
I think that Saudi Arabia and the Middle East are going to be important to a new world order, maybe not any more important than they are in the current world order. They're positioning themselves to sort of graduate from their traditional dependence on fossil fuels to run their economies and their economic growth to becoming tech hubs. And they've been doing so pretty successfully so far. So I do think that they're going to remain important. I also think that the thing that was said there that deserves a little extra attention is that the U.S. and China remain interdependent. Because yes, we do. But one of the things that China's working very hard on is reducing that interdependence on its own side, just as we have been trying to reduce that interdependence. And, I think that there's a real question as to how fast that might happen. And, what will this new world order look like if there is less interdependence, especially on the tech front?
Well, certainly a lot of big questions we've been tackling today and all week, Anna. If I could just go in the moment. Today, we've got the NVIDIA earnings report. What are you looking out for?
I'm looking out for any sign that gives more clarity as to exactly what the U.S. government is prepared to allow NVIDIA to sell, and what that means for possible U.S. government earnings or U.S. government accruals of like a piece of the pie in those NVIDIA sales.
Anna, it's great to have you back. We appreciate your insights. The founder of Ashton Analytics, on an important day here as we gear up, indeed, for the NVIDIA earnings report. And Michelle, the thread that goes through all of these stories is national security, whether we're talking about AI chips or F-35s, the transfer of technology. And that's going to be a big part of this earnings report this evening when we consider export controls for the likes of China and other countries. We want to just do a quick beat with our panel on this. Rick and Jeanne are here, Bloomberg Politics contributors. Rick Davis, our Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital, joined by our Democratic analyst, Jeanne Zaino, Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Jeanne, what's your take on this? Are we mortgaging our national security in the sake of creating this new world order?
You know, we've had this debate so many times in American history. I think back to the post-Cold War era. This was the debate going on. Bill Clinton was trying to move towards free trade with China, and all of the more hawkish folks in the Democratic Party said not so fast. So it's a continual debate. It is necessary that we keep up with the times, so to speak, and that we really do have this openness. But at the same time, we have to be careful about the impact on national security. And so I don't see this as you can go one way or the other. You've got to have people in both camps in the United States who are watching like a hawk to make sure we don't veer too far in one direction or the other. So I think moderation is the watchword here.
Well, Rick, we talk a lot about, who are our friends? Is the White House dealing with the right people? Are they talking for the sake of talking, giving an open forum, or is it resulting in deals that are worthwhile for the U.S.? I mean, can the White House and Trump specifically, can they make the case that this Saudi visit is part of something that is a down payment on longer-term prosperity?
Well, I think that's exactly where this administration was headed, even in the first term. Look, there's a reordering of the global alliances. And this administration and previous administrations, both Republican and Democratic, have been fighting over turf in the Middle East. Remember, at one point in time, the Chinese were trying to build a port in the UAE, and the United States stepped in and said, you got to make a choice. Either you're going to be aligned with us or you're going to be aligned with them. There's no in between. UAE decided to be aligned with us. I think this is part of the same kind of an effort. It's not whether we can fit into the technology that China has on the ground in Saudi Arabia. It's how hard can we push to get it out of Saudi Arabia. And moderation hasn't worked with China. That's what put us in the position we're in now. China is an adversary in trade, in national security, in international culture and regulations. I mean, there's nothing that we really agree upon right now with China. And so as this world gets, more and more opportunistic, we have to be there shouting our name.
Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino will stay with us. Our panel of Bloomberg Politics contributors up next with much more as we wait to hear from Howard Lutnick. We'll bring you that conversation live from the Saudi Investment Forum at the Kennedy Center straight ahead. You're going to want to stay here with much more to follow on Balance of Power. Alongside Michelle Jamrisko, I'm Joe Mathieu. This is Bloomberg. The president at any time could sign the discharge petition, the bill that was passed to force the release of the Epstein files. I guess technically the discharge petition is what forced the vote on the Epstein files. Now the question is whether the DOJ will be compelled to release them, knowing, in fact, that the president ordered investigations into Democrats like Bill Clinton that could prevent these files from being released while an ongoing investigation is underway. But I'm jumping too far down the road here. The fact of the matter is all but one member of Congress voted for the release of these files yesterday. Only one member of the House, Clay Higgins, the aforementioned Cajun John Wayne, back when he was a sheriff, now Republican member of Congress from Louisiana, framed this as a stand on principle. He voted no. Everyone else voted yes. I asked Pete Aguilar, Democratic congressman from California, who chairs the Democratic conference in the House, his thoughts on this and how the numbers were so overwhelming. Here's what he said.
This shows that, Donald Trump allowed them. He said he was in a losing position. He knew he was in a losing position. He knew this was going to happen. And so he basically directed all of them, all of our colleagues on the Republican side, to vote for this measure. And so that's the power of Donald Trump as well. He has said himself he's the president and the speaker. He proved it today with that vote.
Remembering, of course, Michelle, that the president could compel the DOJ to release these files literally at any time. We'd pick up the phone, release the files, we'd be done. But he's still following this channel.
Well, and far be it from us to predict what will happen next, but we can raise these questions, and that is a good question. Where does he go next with the DOJ, and will he draw on the powers that he has of the president to direct them to keep things safe?
Knowing he could have done that at any time
in
the last 9 months or whatever it's been here. Knowing as well that he's, as I mentioned, ordered the investigations into the likes of Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, and others. He's pointing the nation's attention toward Democrats. But he has also said he's going to sign this bill. So we're wondering when this happens. You've covered the White House. He could pick up the pen, do that anytime today, right?
Yeah, he's got quite a busy day, of course, just coming out of that investment forum. And, of course, he wants to keep the narrative on this sort of prosperity as well as affordability that we keep losing in the past few days with everything else going on. But certainly he wants to own the narrative and not in a way that highlights any of this. So maybe, we could see a midnight signing or something meant to be more under the radar to try to keep it out of the front page of the news.
Maybe late Friday night. We'll see. Could happen any moment now. And that's where we start with our panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us. Rick is partner, Stonecourt Capital, our Republican strategist. Jeanne, our Democratic analyst, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. What do you think, Jeanne? Are we ever going to see these files, or will there always be the so-called smokescreen of an ongoing investigation?
I don't think we know yet, but I do think that you were just talking, you and Michelle, about the right question. Is the next step is the president signing, and I am very curious if he does try to do a midnight signing or if he listens to the victims. I was so moved, Joe, by those victims, those women standing out there and holding up, and I'm sure you saw this, the pictures of themselves, 13, 14, and 15, very young girls saying, this was me when I was abused, raped, assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein. And they have asked the president, some of whom voted for him, to please have them in for a signing ceremony because they want what they have gone through to be recognized. And I think it would be so powerful if the president would do that. So I'm very curious to see what happens. After that, of course, it is on to PM Bondi and the DOJ. And to your point, do they try to hide behind a smokescreen of new investigations to not release files? But I think in the long term, the fact that this is a bill out of Congress, it's going to make that all that much harder to do. But they could try.
Well, Jeanne, you hit on one thing that I did want to kind of ask about, which is the survivors, as they call themselves, haven't gotten a whole lot of play amidst the talk about will he or won't he sign, what is he going to do with the DOJ, that sort of thing. But they were the center of attention for the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who have been pushing for this. And they were actually, in fact, the center of attention, arguably, for Representative Higgins, who said that he voted against it because he was worried about the disclosures hurting the survivors. So where do you see that going from here? Where we can, I mean, we're obviously focused on the procedure of all this, but are we going to be hearing more from the survivors, you think, in the days to come?
I do think so. They have waited so long to get any relief. They suffered in silence for so many years, and they have been pushing for this. Their attorneys worked with Congressman Massey, worked with Ro Khanna to get this bill put together. And I think, when we talked about it, it was, it's a discharge petition. Those never go anywhere. The fact that they pushed this, and I think I agree with Massey and Khanna, it's really on the work of these victims that they were able to push this over the line in the sort of triumphant, victorious way I don't think any of us imagined. And so I do hope that we hear more about them. This is what they've been asking for, that what happened to them not be forgotten, and that the people who either were a part of it or who turned the other way and apparently are prominent members of our society even today have their reckoning. And I think that we will hear, I hope we hear more from them about that. Well,
there's an interesting ad that's on the air that involves the victims themselves. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's kind of interesting that it's coming from Reid Hoffman, who has been linked to Epstein in a series of reports, and even the president of the United States has called on him. Reid Hoffman posting this ad on Twitter, writing, "The Epstein files must be released in full. Tonight, I supported World Without Exploitation," behind the ad, "to run this ad on Monday Night Football." So you might have actually seen this already. Let's give this a taste for our viewers and listeners.
I was 14 years old.
I was 16 years old. I
was 16.
17.
14 years old. This is me.
This was me.
This is me when I met Jeffrey Epstein.
This is me when I met Jeffrey Epstein.
There are about 1,000 of us.
It's time to bring the secrets out of the shadows.
Now, for the benefit of our radio listeners, it was exactly what Jeanne was just describing. Close-up shots of the victims' current faces. Now they're standing directly in front of the cameras with a black background and holding images of themselves when they were victimized. We see the contrast of their young faces with the way they look now. The ad goes on to read, 5 administrations, and we're still in the dark. Now, I don't know what the deal is with Reid Hoffman or what any of these files may or may not say about him, Rick, but as someone who has worked with campaign advertising extensively over the years, I wonder what you see the impact of this campaign being.
Yeah, look, this is a very powerful ad. I think that it reminds us that this Epstein controversy has been in the public domain for almost 25 years. And so it's sort of a subtle reminder that just because it's been around so long doesn't mean we actually know much about it. Previous administrations, both Republican and Democratic, have swept it under the rug, which gave rise to incredible conspiracy theories as to why that was and what we don't know. And so we finally come to the pinnacle of this moment, where Donald Trump will sign a bill passed by Congress, started by a discharge petition, with unanimous consent from the Senate, which never happens, and we will now then see these documents. I can't imagine a scenario where the Justice Department can take that kind of volume of activity that has welled up over 25 years and not respond to the moment. This administration arguably has done everything wrong when it comes to managing this crisis since the day of his inauguration. And you just got to hope that they get this part right, because this will not go away. It's had legs when everyone thought it would go away. It didn't. And it's not about to be out of the front page of our attention spans in the future. When these documents come out, and with all the search capability you have, we're going to learn a lot of new things. And if it's not clear what it is, the Department of Justice and the Trump administration is going to come under withering pressure to clarify things that are maybe redacted and or not ultimately produced.
So, Rick, understanding that the White House hasn't taken your advice in the past several months on this issue, I'm wondering what you would say to the Republicans, especially in the Senate, but also in the House, who maybe said don't release the files and now have voted for the release of the files. What do you say to them as they prepare for this midterm campaign that is not so far off in the future? How are they going to play this? How should they be prepared to defend switching on this issue?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's going to be difficult for Democrats to attack a Republican, since they all voted right. I mean, save one that we've described who isn't about to have a challenge in his district. And so the reality is everyone's going to stand up and said, I did what I thought was the right thing, right? Regardless of their positions before, no one's going to remember that. My name is a yes on the passage of that discharge petition. And by the way, that takes it kind of out of a partisan political environment, right? I mean, like, I can't imagine a Democrat who's going to want to say, he voted yes, I voted yes, and by the way, we're different. If anything, this is why it's so crucial right now that the administration responds in kind, because the entire political system has done something we have not seen done in a long time, and that's through almost complete unanimity supported something that is very, very important to the public trust, and now they got to make good on it. And so can this be completely depoliticized? I think so. I'm not sure that the Epstein files are going to be a political issue in the 2026 election unless the Justice Department withholds the information.
Jeanne, the Attorney General Pam Bondi talked to reporters a little earlier today. We just got these quotes on the terminal. The Justice Department, quote, will follow the law. She said, the law will be followed while providing maximum transparency and protecting victims. She went on to say, and here's the news. The DOJ, quote, has new information. New information has come forward is the line. She did not elaborate, encouraging all victims to talk to prosecutors. What do we think this means?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, to Rick's point, this has been 25 years. It's hard to imagine, but we do know the president ordered her to begin a new investigation. Maybe it's related to that. But I think there are huge political implications here. I don't think this is depoliticized. And one of them is the fact that we saw Donald Trump for the first time in his second term beat by the backbenchers of his own party, Tom Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene said this nearly destroyed the MAGA movement, and President Trump was forced to retreat 180 degrees and say, okay, vote for it. I know why his voice was not, he had something of a sore throat this week. He was probably screaming his head off at Mar-a-Lago over the weekend as he lost this. He is losing the fight over redistricting. This shows that the coalition has cracks, and Donald Trump is feeling that. Now he's going to have to put it in Pam Bondi's lap, but note his comment on Truth Social, release whatever is legally releasable. That is a sign that they could try to withhold.
Be interesting if it turned out the Oversight Committee gave us more insight into Jeffrey Epstein than anything around the discharge petition. Thanks to you both, Rick and Jeanne, always here for us, Bloomberg Politics contributors, Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino. We're going to get back to the story involving a potential breakthrough in Ukraine, a peace plan that the administration is working on now with top brass, including the Army Secretary, as well in Kyiv today to talk about this. We're going to have more on that coming up with retired General Wesley Clark. First, we want to update Wall Street. We're counting down to NVIDIA earnings, and this is a big one here. Charlie Pellet's got the beat on the markets as we get ever closer to the close. Charlie, at World Headquarters in New York, how's it look?
Right now, looking higher across the board. NVIDIA, of course, not just about the quarter itself for the chip maker, but also how it affects overall sentiment in terms of perceptions about AI spending. Right to the numbers here, because I got a lot of green on the screen, a lot to get to. The S&P up 23 right now, 66.41 where we stand, up by about 0.4%. Has been a choppy day. The Dow spent much of the morning in the red, up 45 right now, up by about 0.1%. We've got NASDAQ up 100 points now, up by about 0.5%. Our Mag 7 index up 0.7%. And NVIDIA, the big story, special coverage on Bloomberg Television and Radio, up now by 2.2%. Your 10-year at 4.10%, with a 2-year 3.57%. Spot gold up 0.3%, 4,081 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.2%, 59.40 per barrel of WTI. Bitcoin holding just above $89,000 right now. Bitcoin is down by 3.7%. Earnings, specifically retailers, Lowe's, the home improvement chain, reported this morning up 5.8% right now. Yesterday, you recall, Home Depot also reported the stock down again, lower by 0.6%. Target also reporting today, along with TJX. And of course, tomorrow morning, we will be hearing from Walmart. Target right now down by 2.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie, many thanks. He'll be back around 2 o'clock, top of the hour, with another check on the markets as we walk into Bloomberg Business Week Daily. It's going to get a little bit hotter as we get ever closer to 420, and that's got nothing to do with Elon Musk. That's when the NVIDIA results typically come out. 20 minutes after the hour, we're going to have Ed Ludlow with us here on a special late edition of Balance of Power that starts at 5 p.m. Eastern Time with the Washington view on the AI race. followed by an exclusive interview with Jensen Huang. Ed Ludlow will bring that to us here on Bloomberg TV and radios. The after-hours session is going to be a doozy, and we're ready for it, ready for you, with much more to follow here. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington, alongside Michelle Jamrisko, with news of a potential breakthrough in Ukraine when it comes to peace. A 28-point plan, according to reporting from Axios, from Politico, and from Bloomberg. We're hearing more about it as the Army Secretary and a couple of top brass, couple of top generals arrive in Kyiv today to talk with Ukrainians about this plan that was born in the administration, we're told, without input from Ukraine or from our European allies. The president clearly agitated and not impressed at the moment with a lack of progress when it comes to Russia. He talked about it during his speech earlier today at the Saudi Investment Forum at the Kennedy Center. Listen.
I've settled 8 wars. I have 1 to go. You know what that one is. I thought that was going to be my easy one because I have a good relationship with President Putin, but I'm a little disappointed in President Putin right now. He knows that. I thought that was going to be the easy one.
The plan right now, Michelle, according to the latest from Axios, would essentially give Russia, recognize Russian territory for all of the Donbass, for all of Crimea, in exchange for a security guarantee. This is the security guarantee, the apparent breakthrough.
Well, there's some that we know, and there's a lot that we don't know, Joe. And I would just say that there's a lot of people talking on either side, and particularly folks in Europe that are concerned about the possibilities here. And we just don't know yet from the White House exactly what the conversations have been and who has been talking. But a lot of rumors flying about some side dealings between the U.S. and Russia that are certainly rankling people in Kyiv as well.
A lot of this said to be coming from the Russian side. So we've got much to learn here and wanted to talk about it with the general. Wesley Clark, retired 4-star Army general, served as Supreme Allied Commander Europe, Commander U.S. Southern Command, Southcom from June of 1996 to 97. Now Wesley Clark, an Associates General. It's good to see you. Welcome back. There was a refrain in the Biden administration that we heard over and over again. Nothing for Ukraine without Ukraine. We've come a long way from there. Is it possible to achieve peace without the input from European partners and Kyiv itself?
I think the administration is seeking to get that input. I know that General Randy George and the Army Secretary met with General Syrski today in Ukraine, and they're seeking first a military appreciation and also an understanding of exactly what's needed to strengthen Ukraine's defense in this. But as you all were saying, there's a lot we don't know about this plan. And the difficulty is the security guarantees and the breach of the concept of, hey, if you can invade and you can take it, you can hold on for a while, the world's going to give up on it, it'll be yours. And that's a dangerous principle to set loose. We have tried our best for 80 years not to allow aggression to pay. And you can argue that Russia's paying a terrible price for this, et cetera, which they are, but so is Ukraine. And the consequences of a faulty deal will echo for a long time. So it's not just a matter of getting the shooting to stop temporarily. Putin will take a pause whenever it suits him, if he thinks he can gain from the pause. But the real question is, will he give up his long-held aim of controlling all of Ukraine and undercutting all of NATO's post-1997 enlargement in Europe? That's the question, because on the answer to that question, it really depends whether the peace agreement's any good or not.
Well, General, thank you for being with us today of all days, and happy belated Veterans Day to you. We thank you for your service. We particularly want to draw on that service today in your time, especially at the head of NATO, to talk about this sort of how do you deal with Putin. You were with us last month, and you said it was sort of a stall, strike, and try to gain territory strategy on the part of the Russian leader. Is that where we still stand now, and is there anything that President Trump can do to kind of make Putin change course in this, or is this a fool's errand?
Well, I think the general consensus, and a consensus that I share, is that as long as Putin believes he's winning, he's not going to be diverted from the course that he has pursued for 25 years. If he feels that he can gain something from a temporary pause that he can then break at will, with weak security guarantees or blaming it on the Ukrainians or going in another direction with his forces while holding in Ukraine, then he might choose to accept a peace agreement. But, you know, all of these agreements are difficult. We're looking at what's happened in Gaza, and despite the great leadership of President Trump and the vision of putting this forward and all of the pressure he's put on, it's still touch and go in Gaza. And here you're dealing with something that's just as intractable in the sense that the Ukrainians don't want to give up their land. This is their land. And to give up all of Donbass, where there are hundreds of thousands of people living, where there's industry, where there's families, where there's history and cemeteries, and people have fought for this land. And if you give up all of Donbass, there's no real defensive position for Ukraine all the way to Kyiv and the Dnieper River. So it would be a huge strategic surrender by Ukraine based on trust in the United States. The question is, can they put that trust in the United States? Will we put our forces at risk? Because remember, what a security guarantee really means is that if there's a breach by Russia, if there's a preparation for a breach by Russia, it means that Europe and the United States would join forces and defend Ukraine. In other words, it's war. It's not that if Russia comes, then we'll talk about it and we'll get out of the way. That's not a security guarantee. So it's Ukraine is going to have to ask some hard questions, and I think the Europeans will ask hard questions too. Everyone wants a war to stop.
You frame that so well, General. When it comes to that trust, then, if this in fact is the scenario, how important is it for the Army Secretary to be there? Dan Driscoll is there. There are 2 4-stars in Kyiv talking to Ukrainians today. How significant is that, and what must the message be from our military?
It's really not a message the military can deliver. The military is a symbol of the United States. It really comes down to President Trump. And if he participates, if the U.S. participates in the security guarantee actively, now, he has said we won't put any troops there. Okay, so that's one mark against us because that weakens a security guarantee, the fact that the United States isn't on the ground. But you could still have a security guarantee if the Europeans were there in sufficient numbers and far enough forward. But a few European forces, say 10,000 men, multinational force located around Lviv, ready to leave if there's a sign of trouble. No, that won't satisfy Ukraine, I don't think, and it won't deter Putin if and when he's determined to go forward. It may be that Putin is licking his wounds right now and saying, "Look, I'm just ready to stop. Give me something for it." But in that case, we should be driving a hard bargain, not giving up Donbass. That's just my impression from having followed this thing at very close range for a number of years. So many questions remain here, but it really does come down to the President of the United States. He's the man who is going to make the difference in peace and war in Ukraine.
Well, General, you mentioned that it comes down to the president, but we've also had a lot of other players in the administration, including Special Envoy Witkoff, who was rumored to be going to Turkey, and then officially we hear that those plans were canceled or never were in the works. But do you see European officials, are they going to be in town by the end of the week? I mean, this stuff has been moving so quickly in various stages. Can you expect that, they'll want to get in on this conversation very soon in Washington?
It could move for a lot of different reasons quickly. But remember, this war would stop instantly at the moment Putin says, I'm stopping the war. So he has it totally in his power to stop. He can stop it with an hour's notice. So really, when it stops is more a function of Putin than anything else. So the president will want to determine what is the minimum that Ukraine can give up to assuage Putin keep him there, lock it in, and then what must be done to secure it by the Europeans? The Europeans have to be willing to put their men's lives on the line to secure this. That means they've got to be forward. It means they've got to have fighting capability, not an observer mission, not people in Humvees running around with radios and blue helmets reporting on what's happening. There may be some of that required to determine whether there's been a violation, but it's got to be backed up by hard power.
Come back to the Kennedy Center with us for a moment, General, because the president, of course, is there not to talk so much about Putin or even Ukraine, but Saudi Arabia. And we've seen a flurry of deals that have been announced that all invoke the prospect, or at least a question, of national security. They include advanced AI chips. They also include stealth F-35 fighter jets. The president talked about this a short time ago. Here's what he said.
It was great to be with you last night. I think it was something to behold. We officially designated the kingdom yesterday as the major non-NATO ally. That's a big deal. That happens seldom, very seldom, if at all. So I just want to congratulate you on that. That's a sign of trust.
So seldom. There are 18 nations that apparently enjoy that status, General, but the F-35s are a question, knowing that a special variant had been put together and designed for the Israelis, the F-35I, that allows Israeli military to plug directly into that system with their own avionics. Will Saudi Arabia have a similar arrangement with the United States? And doesn't that put the Saudis on par with the Israeli Air Force?
I believe there will be some kind of special arrangement. I think that'll have to be worked out in private discussions. This is an effort to advance the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia has been a reliable partner of the United States, despite what happened on 9/11 with some individual Saudis and all of the furor going on for that. But for 80, 90 years, the United States and the Saudis have worked very, very closely together. And I will say also that their armed forces have rapidly improved over the last 30 years. They've come a long, long way from where they were, let's say, when they were aligned alongside us in 1990, 91 for the Gulf War, especially in the Air Force. The Air Force is excellent. It's got excellent equipment, and I know, of course, they want that F-35, and I think they'll be capable of employing it effectively and in conjunction with the United States and perhaps with Israel if the Abraham Accords go through the right way and if Iran remains a major security threat in the region.
Well, General, there certainly has been a lot of soft power at play yesterday and today in this Saudi visit. And I wonder, sometimes it might be okay in critics' view that Trump says, okay, this is a great gentleman. We have 80 years of a bond between our two countries. But do you have any concerns about the deals that are supposedly in the works yesterday and today, supposedly being approved, how those move into a hard power territory with a country that hasn't traditionally been an ally and maybe at the risk of national security to the U.S.?
Well, actually, Saudi Arabia has traditionally been an ally. Even back in the late 60s, early 70s, the United States relied heavily on Iran under the Shah and the Saudis as the twin pillar strategy in the Gulf. After the Brits had withdrawn from the Gulf, then we picked up the Saudis as a major ally. They weren't designated as a major non-NATO ally, but they were a major ally. We've done a lot over the years. We helped rebuild created the Saudi Arabian National Guard, their military. We've been with them. We provided them intelligence. We provided them military hardware. We've given them advisors. It's been decades and decades of excellent security relationship. And you can't forget that in 1990, when Saddam invaded Kuwait, Secretary Cheney went to Saudi Arabia. He talked to the king. That's when they accepted the presence of major U.S. forces there in Operation Desert Shield to deter a further Iraqi advance into Saudi Arabia and the eastern province oil fields. And that deterrence was successful. And then we went on in conjunction with Saudi forces that were allied and aligned with the United States in some of these operations. So it's been a long record of security cooperation. I don't think that's an issue, really.
Saudi Arabia is employing Russian-made air-to-ground missiles, though, correct? In our remaining moment, General, do you worry about the creep of technology transfer getting into the wrong hands?
Well, we always have to worry about this, but technology does migrate. You simply can't keep it secret. It's just the way it works in the world. And really, starting in 2014, when the Saudis formed OPEC Plus, there was an alignment of interests with the Russians. And that wasn't necessarily a bad thing at the time. And so we have to appreciate that Saudi Arabia is not the United States. It has its own position in the world. But in terms of advancing U.S. interests, they have been a reliable ally, and we would expect it to continue.
It's good to have you back, General. Wesley Clark with us live on Bloomberg TV and radio as we learn more about this arrangement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia following the investment conference this morning featuring the likes of Elon Musk and Jensen Huang. We'll have much more on that in the late edition of Balance of Power starting at 5 p.m. Eastern with full coverage of NVIDIA earnings after the bell. Alongside Michelle Jamrisko, I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. Thanks for being with us once again on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg.